Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. This podcast is brought to you by Virtual Not Distant, where we help managers and teams transition to an office-optional approach. Find out everything we do over at virtualnotdistant.com and check out our show notes and pictures of our lovely guests over on the podcast page. It's great to have you here, listeners. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. Today I am talking to Nicholson, who is the director of the Virtual Training Team company. And, well, I'd been waiting to talk to Catherine for ages. I met her, like many people who appear on the show, I met her through LinkedIn. We've had many asynchronous conversations and even some real-time online meetings together. So I've been wanting to bring her on the show so that you could hear from her how she's been helping people, organizations, individual trainers take their training online, how she's been doing that for the last 4 years. She's been an online trainer for much longer than that. Also, some of the changes she's seen over the last year. And of course, those barriers which are mainly in our minds about when we're thinking of transferring how we work from the co-located space to the online space. Some of those things that actually we just need to get over in our heads. And also something else that came up during the conversation was the opportunity to do things differently because you're operating in a different space. So I hope you will enjoy my conversation with her. And to say that if you are on LinkedIn, connect with her because she is so much more enthusiastic than I am about the wonderful technology that allows us to have great experiences online together, that you will learn a lot from her. She often posts stuff around Microsoft Teams, Zoom, all the tech, and her company has a wonderful YouTube channel as well. So do connect with her because I'm sure she'll be very happy to hear from you. So what we'll do, we'll have that conversation first, and then I'll come back at the end just to complement that conversation or actually just go somewhere else in the episode talking about the current plans. We're in May 2021 around moving into hybrids. So just some of my thoughts around that. But first, let's start with Catherine, who began by telling me, well, why on earth did she set up the virtual training team?
The virtual training team had its 4th birthday in February. As an actual organization. We started off quite small, actually considering maybe the virtual training team might be a bit of a lifestyle choice for my husband and myself, because we'd spent many years as trainers traveling the world delivering face-to-face training and had this great idea and this great passion for virtual training. So we created the virtual training team, and we realized that this is a bad idea for a lifestyle choice because there's so much to be done in this area. And we love it so much that we decided to really invest our time and our energy to growing the business. And we have, and we've got a whole team now that spans from India across to the UK and beyond. And we absolutely love what we do. And so we specialize in 3 areas. We deliver virtual training. We design and help our clients design virtual training too. And then we do a lot of train the trainer. So helping trainers and coaches and organizations to do both of those, design and deliver their own virtual training. So we like to think that we were doing this before it was cool. And we certainly weren't driven to do this by lockdown and COVID. We were here well before then.
So just to let listeners know, we are recording it's April now, 2021. Not sure when the episode will come out, but definitely if you're listening to in the future. And I find it really funny that you say, it was a lifestyle choice and then there was a lot of work to be done. It's a good choice, Catherine. You work mainly with organizations and people delivering training in organizations, is that right?
Yes, so delivering training in organizations, designing training for organizations, and then, like I said, the trainer, so helping them do exactly both of those things for themselves.
I mean, it's very interesting for me to hear how the last year has been different. Have the type of people that came to either help you design their courses or deliver courses for them online or helping them to train their own trainers, or has it changed a lot over the last year, or actually it's been more or less the same, but just maybe more?
A bit of both. What happened at the very beginning of lockdown, as I'm sure many of your listeners will have experienced themselves, is there was this huge question mark that just hung over everybody's head as to what's going to happen? How long will this last? What do we do? And a lot of organizations went into, I wouldn't say panic mode, I would maybe more self-preservation mode. Let's just stop any spend, any investment, any time. Let's just batten down the hatches and really focus on the basics, the fundamental elements of our business. So we found that some of our biggest clients just stopped. They stopped training altogether. They certainly stopped having external providers support them with training. We actually lost a lot of business at the very beginning of lockdown, but at the same time, we started to have new organizations come to us to say, help. We're now stuck in a situation where we have to continue with training and supporting our customers and staff, but we don't know how to, and we need your help. And so a lot of those organizations came from the world of pharmaceuticals, biotech, science. So as an example, we had field application scientists whose job was to be, the clue is in the title, in the field. Mm-hmm. Their job might be to train customers in how to use specific instruments or apparatus that they'd sold to customers. And it was like, okay, now we can show you how to use it. But they couldn't go into labs. They couldn't go into hospitals. So they had to learn how to do that virtually. And this was a new challenge for us because a lot of the train the trainer programs that we delivered previously was for organizations supporting their trainers in things like soft skills, how to train managers virtually or customer service staff virtually. And now we're helping organizations to train really hard and important topics that traditionally hadn't really naturally fit in the virtual space. And we had to figure out how to make that happen. So yeah, there have been changes, and we're doing a lot in that area now. And thankfully, a lot of the organizations that did turn the tap off have realized that long term, staff need that support and that training, and that's all continuing again now.
So that's fascinating. I want to know what you had to learn in order to support that different kind of training. So you were used to the soft skills, which is a horrible term, but we still use it.
I know.
People know what we mean by that. To more the technical training and the training that does benefit from being side to side with sharing the resources that you're going to need in the training. Because I suppose when we're doing, for example, management training, it doesn't matter whether we're in the co-located space or online. We don't have the environment where we usually are. We don't have our team there to practice. Yeah. But in training where actually you probably would be holding something physical. So what did you have to learn to be able to design and deliver that training?
Well, also sort of elaborating on your question there as well, if you're training somebody on how to give feedback or coach, if they have a go and outside of the training and it doesn't quite go exactly to plan, hey, that was just a conversation that didn't quite go to plan. When you're training a customer on how to use a DNA sequencing machine, the results have to be absolutely accurate. You can't fly by the seat of your pants. It's got to work. You've got to get it right. So how we learn and how we supported our clients who are going through all of this is we work together. So we've got a sort of internal, informal philosophy here that we love the challenge of having to innovate and finding a way. I love it when we have clients come to us and they say, we want to do this virtually, but we just don't think it will work. And in the early days, it was things as simple as coaching. We can't coach virtually or train people how to coach virtually. And I was like, why? Well, in a face-to-face environment, we'd practice, in small groups. That's what breakout groups are for. Yeah. So we've always prided ourselves on saying, give us the challenge. We haven't been beaten yet. We can usually find a way if we get really creative. But this was a real challenge. So often we work together to generate ideas and, say, okay, let's say, well, what would you do in a face-to-face environment? How can we replicate that? And just a couple of examples that are really quite different that hopefully land the point. So one example was, getting up close and personal to the equipment. How do you do that sitting in front of a laptop? So what we worked out is delivering the training in pairs, fully PPE'd up. And what you would have is that one person was the facilitator, and then their partner was the eyes of participants. So they would have a second camera that could go up close into the machinery and point at the different bits. And so working as a pair, there was still that element of feeling like they were in a room. Participants could feel that they were in a room, getting close to the equipment and seeing what needed to be done, but able to do that from a safe distance. And anecdotally, some of the comments that came back was, I never need to go into a wet lab ever again. We can do this virtually and it works and it's scalable and we don't have to travel and it's safe and all of those great things. So that was one example.
Explain again, so was one person actually there with a camera or how did that work? How could you get up and close personal?
As an example on Zoom, you may well know this, you can have two cameras that you're using at the same time. Mm-hmm. So you can have, for example, your webcam, and then you could have a second camera looking at something completely different. And you can sort of jump between the two cameras. Mm-hmm. So in this case, there was somebody on the webcam, you can see their face and they're explaining a particular procedure. And then they would flip to the second camera that somebody else is manning that is showing what's being described up close and personal live in the moment. And this is really important because one thing that was experimented with was doing pre-recorded videos to show how to do various things with complicated pieces of equipment. The challenge with that, though, is when you get a participant that says, can I have a question? I've got a question. Could you just go back to that bit there? Or can you show me up close that section on the machinery here? If you'd pre-recorded a video, you didn't have that flexibility. So having somebody literally with a camera in the room, being able to flex to the questions and the needs of the participants made it so much more of a useful and richer experience.
Wow. So you have the person who's in a way delivering most of the training or the instructions, explanations, then the person in the space with the machine, and then whoever is receiving that training.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good. You had another example.
Yeah, it's completely different. But some of these, scientists that we were working with, where they were struggling to make the shift to virtual is that they tended to be very hands-on in terms of drawing diagrams or having a diagram that they could then draw all over. And this one guy said, I live and die by my flip charts. The way that I describe models and explain processes is by taking participants through with a flip chart and a pen. And I can't do that virtually. So, of course, our response was, why not? And so we explored different options because, of course, you've got whiteboarding apps that can do just that. And he was like, yeah, but still, that the whole feeling of using my hands and it's just not quite the same. So we explored a few ideas. And one of the ideas that he took forward was, again, the second webcam idea. But what he would do is he would have on his desk in front of him a big A3 pad of paper and his pens. And he would take the second webcam and point it down onto his paper. And then he would draw and everyone could see. And what he actually did is he encourages participants to copy the drawing for themselves. So they were engaged, they were making their own version, they could add their own notes. One of the things I loved about that, and we're encouraging this more and more, is going analog in a digital environment. Just because we're in a digital world when we're virtual doesn't mean that everything has to be digital.
Yeah, I am nodding. You can't see me and neither can listeners. I am nodding. And I have to say that I'm not a very sketchy person. I'm very wordy, obviously, with podcasts.
Yeah, me too. I can't even draw a stick man.
And even though I do play with doodles, but that's not how I work when I'm explaining stuff. However, I have seen the people who really love and hug their flip charts having that setup. So I've seen either photos or when I've been in workshops where the person will have maybe even just one camera, but they have their flip chart behind them and they use that. So I think sometimes, yes, we've got this tech and the tech is amazing and you can do so many things, but actually sometimes just using the camera as a camera and the computer as a camera is enough.
Yeah. Another really nice example that we had of this recently was one of our participants. Actually, it was something around coaching or learning. And he said in a face-to-face setting, a real memorable exercise that we do is to have people learn how to juggle in the room. The whole learning and failing and learning from your mistakes and going around that whole process. Yes. He said, but how do we do that virtually? What do I do? Post juggling balls to everybody. And so I put it to the group and said, come on, let's get creative. How could we do this? And somebody said, simple. Just get your participants to take 3 pieces of paper, scrunch them into a ball. Hey, presto, you've got 3 juggling balls.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah. I was thinking socks.
Oh, that's an idea. Yeah, nobody came up with that idea. I'll let them know. Socks, perfect. Yes, clean ones, ideally.
But it has to be maybe a little bit of prep to make sure that because if not, you could have people spending 10 minutes to go and get some socks.
Bring socks in the joining instructions.
So we're starting to find, it's interesting because the parallels between learning to teach or train online and learning to collaborate with others online coming from the physical space, the principles of that transition start to be very similar, which are, what did we aim to do? Is there something that we can do quite quickly that is a replica? And actually, when do we have to go completely off what we used to do and innovate completely, because it's not what we had, it's not going to work. So what do you think are the major mindset blocks then that you've come across for people who are used to delivering in a room and then have to deliver online?
So are you thinking about the actual deliverers and facilitators of training themselves?
Yes, so the trainer and the facilitator, yeah, so the person who's in charge of the learning experience.
There are 3 key things that jump out at me. The first one is a fear of the technology, and seeing the technology, whether it's the platform or the cameras and all of it, it's about seeing that as a barrier to the experience. Whereas once you embrace it, it actually can totally enhance the experience because we've got extra features. We've got the chat box. You don't have a chat box facility in a face-to-face environment, so we could use that. We've got emojis in Microsoft Teams, which are great fun. So I think the first thing is the barrier and the confidence levels about worrying about the technology. And what we often see is that people new to delivering virtual training who are concerned about that, they forget to enjoy themselves. They're worried that things might go wrong. But let's face it, in any training environment, things go wrong. We have fire alarms, the electricity goes, yes. the projector breaks down, you realize that you've brought the wrong handouts. It happens. It's how you deal with it that really counts. And I found that maybe this is just using this as a personal excuse, but I often find that when things go a little bit wrong, participants actually enjoy that because it's like, okay, this is real, you're human. It means that if I do something wrong or if I hit the wrong button, it's okay. And it's about creating a psychological safety. So we do a lot of hand-holding in helping trainers get comfortable with the technology, but not being overwhelmed by it. Because ultimately, if you can work out how to share some slides and to get the chat box going and switch your camera on, really that's all you need for an amazing virtual experience. The other stuff is great, but it's not essential. So that's the first barrier. The second barrier is a concern about getting interactivity going. And I've been there. So you mentioned about, the history of the virtual training team. Pilar, I delivered my first ever virtual workshop 12 years ago. I know, and it was awful. I didn't enjoy it at all. And I think in part was my over-optimism and overconfidence. And I thought, hey, I'm a comfortable trainer. I just do what I do face-to-face in a virtual environment and it will work. And it didn't. And part of that was that awful feeling when you put a question out to the group, an open question, that you would get some at least nods or responses in a in-person environment, a co-located environment, but you get a tumbleweed in that virtual environment and it hurts. It feels like, I'm convinced I would burn calories running my first workshops. I would get so wound up. And that's what a lot of trainers are concerned about, is not getting interactivity, having awkward silences. And we can help them with that because there's loads of different things that we can do to direct the traffic of conversation, to make it conversational, to move things around, keeping everybody involved, keep them interacting. And once you show people how to do that and they embrace it, then that barrier is gone as well. And the third mindset barrier is this idea that virtual will never be as good as face-to-face. Now, I'm using the term face-to-face loosely as well, because we've had this debate internally about virtual training. If our cameras are on, it still is face-to-face, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts are about what the right language is, but it's, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's the whole difference between all being in a room together versus virtual. And we had an example of this a few months ago where we were We were hosting and facilitating a large innovation event. There was people from all over Europe that had come together virtually for a series of innovation workshops. It was something that was originally intended to be in Copenhagen, with everyone traveling to be together for a few days and a few nice meals and a few drinks. Somebody really senior who was sponsoring the event did an introduction at the start. And he said, "Hey, everyone, I know we were supposed to be together in Copenhagen today and, all together, but COVID's come along and we can't. So unfortunately, we're going to have to make do with a virtual event." Oh, no, and I just could have cried because that whole positioning was setting it up like what we're having today is like a poor relation to what we could have had. And yet what he could have said is, how amazing is this? We're all home, we're safe, we've got our dogs and cats curled up around our feet. We're together virtually and we can do amazing things. Do you know what I mean? It's that positioning. And so I think a barrier is that mindset that if you assume that it's going to be a lesser experience, then it's more likely to be.
I think also from what you're saying, it's funny, I think we've got to accept it's a different medium, but really accept that. Not that it's something that can help us to recreate something, or not something that, like you say, that is there just in case. It's a different medium. And once you embrace that, you say, okay, well, what can this medium do better than other media? Or a medium, I don't know how you say it. And you say, well, okay, if we were in a room together, that would be better for X. However, we're not. So how can we exploit this other medium to give us something that is better?
That's a great point. Well, a question that we ask in one of our workshops in our Train the Trainer program is, how is creating a conversation different in the virtual environment from being in a room together? And we have things like, well, you can't read everybody's full body language, for example, and people can't always tell who's going to speak next. So we might speak over each other or hold back because we don't want to interrupt somebody. And we have this whole conversation, and the conclusion of it is always the same. In person versus virtual, it's not saying one is better or worse. They're just different. And like you said, once you embrace that and accept that they're just different, then you can really tap into those differences and make the best of them.
Yeah. And so just moving slightly away from it, or maybe it builds on it, I don't know. So what other kind actually of training or workshops have you been involved in that people maybe were thinking, oh, but we couldn't do that. And then you said, oh, actually we could, or that they thought, oh, we had planned to do this, but we can't. So we're going to do this instead. Anything that comes to mind that the person coming to you, the organization, thought, actually, we're not going to be able to do this online?
I would say the classic one is presentation skills training.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic in that people say, well, you've got to be in a room together to do that. And of course you don't. And the real irony of this is most of the probably all of the presentations that everyone's doing right now are virtual.
Yeah.
But we often don't think of it as a presentation if we're sitting, in our kitchen looking into our laptop in a meeting. But it is. So that's something that we had quite a bit of pushback from.
Was that before COVID, Catherine, or even during?
Both, actually. I would say more so pre-COVID.
Yeah, okay.
And then that realization that, well, we need to get good at doing this and comfortable doing this virtually as well. So I would say that was definitely the classic.
Great. And what else? What other? How have you changed then? So you said you do the train the trainer kind of thing. Do you also do open courses on that, or is it mainly in-house?
Every month we do an open program, which I actually deliver that one myself. I love it. It's one of my most favorite things to do, because we get independent trainers, we get people from organizations, so a real mixture of people who are planning on delivering virtual training on different topics with different challenges, and everyone learns, including me. We learn so much from each other in that environment. So yeah, we do both in-house and open.
Oh, so one question I have for you is about the technology. Just came to mind. Do you have a choice? Are you finding that you have a choice of what technology to use during the training for in-house? Or actually, are you pretty much stuck with whatever the people have?
I would say most organizations, they're now at a point where they've decided this is the platform that we're using. We're going with, and often it's Teams or Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are other platforms sometimes that are used, but they're the two biggies. And I love the whole space race that's going on with Teams and Zoom, because they're fighting for our attention, which means they keep needing to improve and outdo each other the whole time, and we're the ones that benefit from that. Of course, needing to keep on top of things. So I would say certainly in-house, but there's often a mixture as well. And what we found sometimes with our trainer programs, both the in-house and the open ones, is we might start the first session on Zoom, and a bit of the conversation says, well, this is great, but sometimes I have to deliver on Teams. And we go, okay, well, let's make our next session on Teams. And we have that flexibility to be able to jump between platforms. But what are you finding? I don't know what the latest figures are actually between Teams and Zoom. Are there any other platforms, Pilar, that you're hearing a lot of people using for virtual sort of training and facilitation?
No, those two are the main ones. And it's often Zoom is often the special one. For example, we used Zoom with a client recently who needed interpreters. So Zoom worked beautifully for that. And I was amazed because I'd never worked with an interpreter. So, but it was really strange because they had a camera to the stage where usually you would have had someone presenting. They also had someone who logged in. The interpreter didn't have a camera, so they were blacked out in Zoom. So, and then we also have the person the technical support who had to be there, of course, because this was all a bit complicated. So I had about 6 black boxes in Zoom that didn't represent a participant. And then we were only a small group of 12. So it was really strange to be looking at a screen. This is one where it's a very strange experience where actually you had the presence of people who weren't really taking part. It was an interesting one. Have you worked with interpreters?
Well, not in a virtual environment. No, I haven't. However, so 2 things that just came to mind there. Zoom, and now I'm going to get mixed up. I think Teams has, because you can put on subtitles in Teams.
Yeah.
You can have those interpreted into a different language as well. Did you know that in meetings?
No, I didn't know it was easy. I suppose does it have to be turned on by the admin?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. It's really easy. Wow. I mean, if we were in Teams now, I'd do a quick check, but it was so straightforward. We were blown away by how easy it is. And literally, we could be having a conversation now and you can put the subtitles up, and I think the choices of language was I think it was more than 40 different languages, from Arabic to, Japanese to French, you name it. It was really impressive. And there is a way of doing it in Zoom, but it's a little bit more complicated. I'd have to get back to you on that one. And the same goes for the black boxes of people that aren't involved. Again, I'd need to check whether it's Teams or Zoom, but there is an option to not show in the gallery view people whose cameras aren't switched on.
Right.
And that's a nice feature if you've got that, where you've got people that are just there as tech support, for example, or interpreters. Their presence then isn't felt.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I love it, learning loads. So how do you stay on top of all the tech that's available? Because I imagine as a trainer of trainers, especially, and in the online space, and actually you've been around, maybe the company's only been around for 4 years, but you've been training, like you say, for more than a decade. How do you stay on top of that? Do you practice in your team with your other trainers and say, let's jump onto Google Hangouts and see how that experience is? Or is it pretty much this client needs this, okay, let's learn how to do it?
It's a real mixture. So yes, we jump on and have a play sometimes. I'm always, so in Zoom, I'm always checking for updates. And when you do an update, it tells you what's being updated, and I'll investigate that to find out what it actually means. And the same with Teams, because I'm the admin for our internal teams. Every day I'm getting updates from Microsoft as to what the new things are that are coming and what has changed. So I keep on top of it from that perspective. And then I'm all over the internet looking for what's new and what's going on. But also, in addition to that, I learn a lot from getting things wrong. It happens the whole time in any virtual event. Something happens or somebody can't do something and it's like, oh, haven't come across that before. And then you have to create the workaround and find out how to fix it or whatever. And then that's something new that has been learned. And then we try and keep our own coaches updated with that, because things are changing the whole time and we're finding new improved ways of doing things the whole time as well. I mean, look at Microsoft Teams and breakout sessions. I was so excited when the breakout facility arrived. But previous to that, we were doing all sorts of different workarounds to still find a way of having the breakout experience without it being an official breakout function.
Yeah. So how have you started to work with more people? Because you have a team, and you said you're global. So how fast did you have to recruit over the last year? But maybe that's not the best question. Maybe the best question is, how do you find people who you think are going to deliver following your methodology, or who are true to your values, etc.? Because you're, of course, a virtual company. What's your process like? Or is it pretty much that you find people and then you get closer to them, or do you recruit openly? How does that work?
It's a great question, because it's been the classic challenge of being a small company that scales. You need to work out how you do what you do and how do you get other people to do it to the same level, if not better. So how we do it is we have any coach that delivers training for us has been through our Train the Trainer program. And as part of that, we do practical sessions where they actually deliver training. We measure them and audit them against a whole list of criteria. We've got 6 principles that we use that underpin everything that we design and deliver in our virtual training, because we know it adds learning transfer. And so everything is against that. And if we're happy that we like the quality of their delivery and we think they're a good fit, then they're part of the coach network, which we then regularly audit, and we jump in and we observe what they're doing. But also we support our coaches really carefully in so if they're delivering a workshop for us, we're very big on supporting them to get them ready. But we do it in a way that we just had some feedback recently that one of our coaches said that their prep time is halved in the way that we prepare them, but they feel that they're doubly prepared as a result of the way that we prepare them, if that makes sense, because we do all sorts of things like condensed coach guides rather than pages and pages of scripts. We trust that our coaches know the content. Otherwise, why would we select them as a coach? If they're delivering a session on giving feedback, then they ought to know some of the science and psychology and neuroscience around giving feedback. That's why we've selected them to deliver it. But what we also do is we do a video walkthrough for coaches that says, hey, look out for, in this activity, this is something that could work. This is how you could flex it. This is something to watch out for. These are some of the key messages to land. These are some of the questions that you might get. So we really support them, I hope, very well in order to get that consistency of delivery, whilst, of course, still allowing them to bring their amazing personalities and experience to the gig as well.
Do they operate also as a community or as a team? Are they in touch with each other, or not? How do you stay in touch? Do you use mainly, is it mainly through meetings? Do you have asynchronous spaces? Give us a little bit of the backstage.
Yeah, so we've got a WhatsApp group, which is great and really responsive, because we had somebody running a session in WebEx recently, and halfway through their workshop, WebEx. I
Sorry.
didn't even know it's still around yet. And they sent a message on the WhatsApp group to say, help, I've gone into a breakout session and I can't get out. And instantly, 3 people were on there saying, try this, do that. So really supportive. But what we've just started to do, and we've got our first one coming up, is our Coach Power Hour, where we get together, and what we're going to be doing in our next one is to say, what are all the challenges that you have with tech? And then together we're going to see what are the workarounds we can do, how can we fix that? So that's another way of us keeping on top of the tech, but staying together.
Excellent. That is really great, Catherine. So I think, we could go on forever, but and in this show we do go on forever. However, maybe we can catch up later on in the year, and just to see what else has been going on for you. I think it'd be lovely if you gave listeners I was going to say your contact details, but basically where's the best place to stay in touch with you, and also if there's anything that you'd like to add that I haven't asked you, or that's on your mind right now, then I think now is a good time for that.
The easiest way to check out what we're doing, if you want some tips and ideas around your own virtual training, delivery and design, is to check out our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and search the Virtual Training Team, and there's loads of really mini helpful resources available to you there, how-to guides. If you want to find me, you can email me. I have the longest email address in the world ever. It's catherine.nicholson@thevirtualtrainingteam.co.uk. Check out our website, which is the same domain with .com on the end as well, or you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. And anything else did you want to say, or are you happy now?
I'm always happy, Pilar, you know that. But I'm just so thrilled that we've actually taken the time to do this. Would love to get involved in future sessions, but also would love to hear from your listeners about some of the challenges that they've got, some of the successes they've got. A real win in this environment is the generosity of all of the people in this environment. I've learned so much from other people's ideas. So bring it on. Let's carry on sharing the love.
Well, listeners, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Just to remind you, the name of our wonderful guest is Catherine Nicholson. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can also email her, catherine.nicholson@thevirtualtrainingteam.co.uk. And you can find out everything about her company over at thevirtualtrainingteam.com. So, listeners, I said at the beginning that for those of you who like long-form episodes, the longer chunks, then stay with me for a while. And if you've had enough, or if this is the perfect length for you, about half an hour, then thank you very much for listening. But I just wanted to share some thoughts around the whole move to hybrid, which is some people working in the office, some people working away from the office, and how this is going to be such a popular model. It's definitely a popular model now. Lots of countries are still in some form of lockdown or getting out of lockdown, or actually are experiencing, some of them, their worst lockdown for a while. So there's a real sense, I think, that the office provides a social environment. So it's not just organizations and senior management and leadership that want people back in the office. A lot of people want to get back there because it's something familiar, because it's where some of the strongest social bonds have been formed. So it is a huge period of transition, and a lot of people are going to be running away from the last year by going straight back into the office. So I think for all of us, it will need a lot of pausing, a lot of reflection, and we just need to be careful not to be making too many assumptions for both what people want and also why they want certain things as well. And I'm just going to give you an example. I was thinking of the classic, let's go to the office to be with others and work alongside, shoulder to shoulder, albeit at a distance for a while, with other people, and let's do the things that would require more concentration at home. Well, already that to me says we're already assuming that everyone works better in the quiet of their home, if they have the quiet in their home. But even if they do, some people might not be able to concentrate at home, and some people might want to go to the office to do individual work because they like people around them, or because they like to be amongst people they know, or whatever reason. And it does remind me of an article I wrote quite some time ago, which was called "Flexible Work is Not Working from Home." And it was indeed about a friend of mine who'd been asked to work from home because they were reducing the office space. And he said, "I can't work from home. Can you give me membership of a co-working space?" He was lucky enough, he had one. And they wouldn't. Because for them, it was, you have to be working from home. And he couldn't. So I think that we need to remember that if we're making decisions, and also even as individuals, just seeing what we're being offered and seeing, actually, this is going to be another different way of working. For some people, this having to change location during the week, how is that going to make us feel? Because I think we're used to either being mainly in the office or mainly not in the office. And now it's going to be a whole new way of working as well. Having to change location or choosing to change location during the week. And that's another thing we might not be used to. The other thing, I'm starting to wonder whether we've got all this wrong. Whether we're just focusing too much on location. And what we need to be starting to think about is, what is it that we need to do the different bits and pieces of our work as individuals and as a team? And again, like always, there will be teams for whom there's just no choice, etc. But for some of us, and I'm just wondering whether we're focusing that we have to be X number of days somewhere and X number of days somewhere. And actually, shouldn't we start looking at specifically what the work requires, the resources we need, the physical resources we need, the human resources we need, the kind of interactions we need, and the kind of atmosphere that is going to help us best. And then from there, decide. And of course, in thinking this, I'm already thinking about the fact that this is way too complex to even start there, because we have reduced amount of space in the office at the moment. And it's probably going to be like this for a while. And it probably is like this in the future, because as you know, many companies are reducing their floor space. So I know it's very complicated. We cannot make it about the location. We cannot make it about the location, because that's just going to restrict so much the choices we have and the choices we make. Whereas now we're trying to negotiate that, because a lot of people will want to be going back to the office for all the reasons. They still will want the flexibility. But this is something that we have to continue revisiting. And I think that really we must talk to our employees about, this is something we must continue revisiting, because if not, we're going to lock ourselves into a way of working that has come out of a reaction to a very difficult year, more than a year, a reaction to navigating something we're not sure of, and also just this focus on location so much. So these are some of the things that are coming up, and those of you who've been following the show for a long time, or who know Virtual Not Distant, or who know me, will know that we've always been about office optional, but the scale at which this is happening now is not something that I had thought of, because when we've been helping people introduce a more office optional way of working, or introducing online collaboration, it's been something that's been gradual. Sometimes it's been piloted. Sometimes we've been working with a team or two, or sometimes we've been working within a culture that already embraced this way of thinking, or an organization that had changed how they formed their teams. Therefore, there was that need to do something different. But it's never been about the whole organization, with everyone around them also having to be making these choices. So it's a very interesting time for us in the space. And I hope that you are getting the time to think about it. And the other thing I'm going to say is that there's a lot of talk about organizations that offer complete flexibility about where you work from will be the winners, for example, or the ones that survive. I'm beginning to think that the organizations that are going to survive, as in they're going to retain their best people, are going to be the ones that invest in communication. Because regardless of the choices that are being made on behalf of employees, when for some reason we can't involve employees in them, which there might be many, the organizations that communicate transparently, that are clear, that take into account the views of people, and then, of course, need to make certain decisions. So the organizations that communicate how those decisions are taken, the organizations that, going back to my earlier point, that acknowledge that we're going to have to keep revisiting this. Well, I think these are the organizations that are going to survive. Even if the organization is saying, well, we've decided for whatever reason that I can't think of, but I'm sure there will be some, that people have to be in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5. I'm sure there's plenty of talent and great people that will be looking for that, but you just need to make sure that you don't attract the people who are not looking for that. So again, let's continue revisiting what are the kinds of choices we can offer. Let's not assume that everybody does certain kinds of things in a certain way. How can we fixate less on location and more on flexibility? And finally, communication is really so important. And of course, I would say that because we have a podcast. Anyway, all of this came because of a Twitter space I ran. I'm at the moment, I might change, you know me, listeners. I am seeing if I can run a Twitter space at 12 o'clock on Wednesdays, 12 o'clock UK time, just to see. I'm just going in there. Apparently it pings everyone who follows me on Twitter. She's in the space, and some people turn up. And the other day I came across one of our guests. It was really lovely. So the reason I'm doing those is just to hear what's going on. So anyone who turns up is welcome in an open space kind of mentality. Whoever is there are the right people. All right. So while I bring up my my checklist of things to point you towards, if you are a facilitator and a trainer, and indeed that's why you're listening to this today, might be the first time you're listening. Hurrah. I'm also part of Facilitation Stories, which is the podcast of the England and Wales IAF chapter. So that might interest you. And I also have a solo show called Management Cafe, which is about management. So again, if you've never heard of that show, check it out. Meanwhile, make sure that you're subscribed to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, this one in whatever app you use. Of course, some apps now say follow instead of subscribe, because subscribe is now going to be a paid choice. You can sign up to our monthly newsletter, which we send out once a month. That's why it's monthly, with reading and listening recommendations, and also a digest of our own content. Some months we have more content than others. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Virtual Not Distant. We have a Twitter account at Virtual Teamwork with a 0 instead of an O in work. And you can always email me, Pilar at virtualnotdistant.com. Just let me know that you got this email from the show, and I will be happy to reply to you. Or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, same thing. Thank you very much again to Catherine Nicholson for appearing on the show finally. And listeners, thank you very much for listening. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Orti, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.